to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience.
We did really try this out last.
Seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a This wait has almost always meant never. We will come to see what one of our...
You're going to hear it in a moment.
We, the undersigned clergymen, are among those who, in January, issued an appeal for law and order and common sense in dealing with the racial problems in Alabama. Problems which cause racial friction and unrest. In Birmingham, recent public events have shown the indication that we all have opportunity for a new, constructive, and realistic approach to racial problems. However, we are now confronted by a series of demonstrations by some of our Negro citizens, directed and led in part by outsiders. We recognize the natural impatience of people who feel that their hopes are slow in being realized, but we are convinced that these demonstrations are unwise and untimely.
We agree, rather, with certain local to face that responsibility and find proper channels for its accomplishment. Just as we formerly pointed out that hatred and violence have no sanction in our religious and political tradition, We also point out that such actions as incite to hatred and violence, however technically peaceful those actions may be, have not contributed to the resolution of our local problems. We do not believe that these days of new hope are days when extreme measures are justified in Birmingham.
We commend the community as a whole and the local news media and we further strongly urge our own Negro community to withdraw support from these demonstrations and to unite locally in working peacefully for a better Birmingham. When rights are consistently denied, a cause should be pressed in the courts and in negotiations among local leaders and not in the streets. We appeal to both our white and Negro citizenry to observe the principles of law and order and common sense.
Of my staff. I'm here because I was invited here. I'm here because I have organizational ties here. But more basically, I'm in Birmingham because injustice is here. Moreover, I'm cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an innocent that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. Disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers the negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. I also hope that the white moderate would reject the myth concerning time in relation to the struggle for freedom. More and more, I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. Yours for the cause of peace and brotherhood, Martin Luther King, Jr.
At his website, rlmartstudio.com. Now, I first heard Ricardo speak on this stage last year as he led a workshop entitled Organizing Dilemmas on the Road to Freedom. I was delighted when Ricardo was asked to be a keynoter this year so more could hear some of what he has to share. Ricardo has a long history as an organizer and disruptor of racism. If you haven't already, I invite you to read Ricardo's bio printed in your program. But for now, let me ask you a couple of things you may not
Thank you. In the struggle for justice, there's something for everyone to do. And while we don't all get the hang of it right away, somehow, if we all do it together, we seem to be able to muddle through, right? For 30 years. At the same time, yesterday, the Bundy gang, white racists who tried to stake their own claim to indigenous land, were let off the hook. Put those two things together, and we have racism as usual. Right? That's what we're here today to talk about disrupting. And when we're talking about disrupting racism as usual, we need to be talking about far more than interrupting inappropriate jokes. We need to be talking about fossil fuel industry and the legitimacy of the governing powers and the governing parties and their lip service to climate responsibility. It's also a challenge to we who believe in justice, to revive, to stretch those atrophied muscles of solidarity that have gotten very little exercise during 40 long years of nonprofit sedation. So, along with the struggle on the plains, the Black Lives Movement in the streets, and the youth-led immigration struggles in the borderland have brought us full circle to that if you consider it to be your duty to spend your life fighting racism, oppression, and exploitation, I would like you to reconsider and to exchange that idea for the commitment to spend your life eradicating them. And that simple change of a word sounds harmless enough, but it's as big as the world. That if we take Assata Shakur's requirement that we were concerned about the dangers, the problems, the experiment that emancipation would represent, the disruption it would be to do something so untried. What are we going to do with all these people? What do we do with all these free black folks? Are we going to export them to Africa? Are we going to give them full citizenship? My goodness. And Douglas said that it was a sign of the moral degradation of the country, that the ownership of human beings by other human beings was considered the norm, and freedom and generosity and compassion was considered the experiment. So let's flip the script and say that what we are doing is disrupting the disruption. Do, but simply removing the toxins that keep us from what we really know about the world. I was at a conference on soil restoration. I'm an artist, right? We need to know these things. And a farmer from North Dakota, where they're doing some very cutting-edge work around sustainable agriculture, was talking about what happened when she started going to her neighbors and talking to them about sustainable methods, about not tilling the soil, about overcropping at the end of And people still fix things. Even in the capitalist market, something broke and you repaired it. One of the greatest profit centers that the capitalist system has discovered is waste. To make things that break and that you can't fix. And you throw them away, and it's cheaper to throw them away. And we have a world that's all about throwing things away, and it's a world that's all about throwing people away. And I think maybe you see where I'm going with this. Because I promised myself I'd actually look at my notes this time. Nowadays, disagreeing with somebody's political ideas, especially in public, is a good way to end a friendship. When I was coming up into activism as a young person, it was a good way to start one. It's a good way to start with. We need to rediscover the joys of compassionate disagreement and a profound challenge. So there are a number of things specifically, that we don't see so well. We're not very good. We can survive difficult discussions. We really can't survive without them. There's things, some of the things, the primary things that we don't see about ourselves. So we got a lot of work to do if we catch up, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to involve disagreement, and it's going to involve being willing to be wrong and to buck the consensus. There's nothing more dangerous in a movement for change than a unanimous consensus. We need every movement that I've ever been exposed to has had an X factor. That one thing that we didn't know at the time that came back to bite us, and we only saw it in retrospect. When Wounded Knee was occupied, the occupiers did not expect the militarized response that we're seeing now at Standing Rock. They did not respect that what started out as an issue of corruption. And when we give each other space to be wrong, that's the same thing as giving each other space to be creative. When I die, I just want my epitaph to read, he didn't always get it right, but at least he got it. So I was at the 4th Precinct occupation one night. That was the response to the police murder of Jamar Clark. And I was standing there talking with a friend, and all of a sudden a chill went up my spine. Not straight from sense. The math tells me that was 47 years ago, but I'm pretty sure it was this morning. Now, Fred was a young black man killed by the cops. That sounds familiar to me. He wasn't so young, he was 21. He was one of the older guys to my 13 years. But that's what put me onto the streets. And I wasn't just drawn to the Panthers because they were under attack. I want to tell you, well, I was drawn to them because they made sense to me. I grew up and come from the occupied island nation of Puerto Rico. Have you heard of it? One of the most important economic engines of the United States that most people don't know anything about other than that there are palm trees. Here we talk a lot about decolonizing ourselves, and I think that's powerful. That's a useful lens through which to work. But I would encourage you to remember that internal colonization is the poisonous child of flesh and blood, boots on the ground colonialism. The armed robbery, the looting, the physical I'm not here to scold you, I'm here to hold you. We have a lot to do. The day I see you marching for Puerto Rican freedom, I will not ask you, where the hell have you been? I'll say, welcome, we've been waiting. And that we need to be saying that to each other more and more as we show up for each other's struggles. So back to the Panthers.